Frodo and Gollum collided, which caused him to lose his footing and fall into the cracks of fate. There is much evidence that this really happened. Was the end of the ring not only an accident but, in a way, predetermined? Hello, everyone. It's Robert. Welcome to Indie Deep Geek. One challenge that The Lord of the Rings sometimes faces is that the climax of the story can feel a bit anticlimactic. After all that background, the epic journey, and the character development, the One Ring is destroyed by accident. Gollum lost his footing, fell, and that was how the ring was destroyed. We all know the build-up. Frodo making it to the cracks of doom but failing in his resolve at the last moment, putting on the ring, then Gollum catching him, biting off his finger, getting the ring, dancing with delight, and then losing his footing and falling into the cracks of doom. This possibly cost Frodo some of the love that other characters receive because, let's face it, he failed in his mission to throw the ring into the cracks of doom. I'll cover in another video why that is probably unfair. Tolkien himself certainly didn't think it was a correct reading of his story. But it is indisputable that Frodo didn't destroy the ring, and but for Gollum losing his footing and falling, it would have all been for nothing. The ringwraiths would surely have caught Gollum, Aragorn's army would have been defeated outside the gates of Mordor, and Sauron's dark rule would have spread across Middle-earth. But what if it wasn't just chance that saved the day? What if Gollum was fated to fall, having been cursed to do so by Frodo himself and the ring? I want to suggest that this is exactly what happened, or at least that it's part of the bigger story of what was going on at Mount Doom. In any event, this wasn't just an accidental trip and fall. It was meant to be. Just as an aside, and because I know many will point it out, all that happened in The Lord of the Rings was meant to be, in a certain sense. R.R. willed it to be so. You can certainly make a case for what happened as a direct intervention of sorts, but here we're talking about the in-story causalities. Why what happened, happened. Okay, so what is this curse I keep mentioning? It happened on the slopes of Mount Doom right before the end. Gollum had tracked Frodo and Sam there and made a last-minute grab for the ring. Down, down! Frodo gasped, clutching his hand to his breast so that beneath the cover of his leather shirt, he clasped the ring. Down, you creeping thing, and out of my path. Your time is at an end. You cannot betray me or slay me now. Then suddenly, as before, under the eaves of the Eamon Mule, Sam saw these two rivals with other vision. A crouching shape scarcely more than the shadow of a living thing, a creature now wholly ruined and defeated, yet filled with a hideous lust and rage. Before it stood a stern figure, untouchable now by pity, robed in white. At its breast, it held a wheel of fire. Out of the fire there spoke a commanding voice. Be gone and trouble me no more. If you touch me ever again, you shall cast yourself into the fire of doom. Frodo then seems to come out of a trance, gasping. Gollum shrinks, and Sam collapses to protect his master. There is a lot to unpack in this little quote, particularly the curse itself. Take the simple point that Frodo tells Gollum that when he touches the ring again, he will be thrown into the fire of fate, and only a few pages later, what exactly happens? It is not a coincidence. Tolkien wanted us to see that what Frodo commanded happened. To understand exactly what occurred, we probably have to rewind a little. In the Taming of Smeagol, however, Frodo swears that Gollum, or Smeagol, will serve the Master of the Ring. As Frodo warns him, "It will hold you. It is more treacherous than her. It can twist your words. Caution!" From that moment, Gollum had to obey Frodo's will when Frodo was the Master of the Ring. If it were a simple wish from Gollum that he would later break, it might not be so significant, but he swore by the precious ring itself. All his existence was now centered around this ring, making it doubly significant to follow the Master of the Ring. Frodo also understands this when Gollum is too blinded by his desire for the precious to grasp all the implications. Frodo shows what this means later when he tells Gollum, "You will never recover the ring, but desire can lead you to a bitter end. You will never get it back in the end." If I were commanding you, you would obey, even if it meant jumping into an abyss or throwing yourself into the fire. That would be my command. So take care, Smeagol." Frodo says that Gollum's desire for the ring will lead him to a bitter end, and if he tried to take it, he would command Gollum to leap from a precipice or cast himself into the fire, and Gollum would be bound to do it. In fact, a word is not strong enough to describe what is going on here. Tolkien tells us exactly what will happen at the end of the quest. Faramir echoes this message that Gollum must keep his word to obey Frodo or die, telling him, "You are under the shadow of death, but while you walk with Frodo, you are safe. Whether death finds you quickly in Gondor or not, if you don't serve him well." The configuration here is very clear. Gollum's doom has been stated several times, but we know when Frodo cursed Gollum on the slopes of Mount Doom because there is another layer to all this. Remember the way we saw this curse in a kind of vision of Sam? He sees Gollum as he really is on a magical or spiritual level, as he perceives Frodo as a figure in white, but at his chest, he holds a wheel of fire. This is ultimately a good figure, but now crucially lacking in pity. Pity is the word Tolkien uses throughout this story to describe how Bilbo, Frodo, and Sam treat Gollum. This is what made them spare Gollum's life, but now Frodo has no mercy. The ring has affected him too much. Therefore, his judgment on Gollum is to condemn him to death, perhaps a merciful death, but nevertheless death. But we can take this even further. Although we've talked about Frodo cursing Gollum, it seems that it is not Frodo who is truly cursing him. It is the ring. We read that Frodo is a figure robed in white, but he keeps a wheel of fire at his breast. An impressive voice speaks from the fire. The voice and the curse were not from Frodo, but from the wheel of fire. This is unquestionably the ring itself. A couple of paragraphs earlier, we read that Frodo is grasping it through his shirt at his breast, where the wheel of fire is. The phrase wheel of fire itself is only used 2 other times in the entire book. Both times, it is Frodo describing to Sam what the ring looks like to him and how it is starting to dominate his thoughts. It is the ring itself that cursed Gollum, that if Gollum ever touched it again, he would cast himself into the fires of Mount Doom. By the way, I use the word curse here, although I don't think it is necessarily the right word. The ring had power over Gollum, and therefore Frodo, as the ring's master, had power over Gollum. The instruction to cast himself into the fires of Mount Doom was a command, one that Gollum was bound to obey, consciously or unconsciously. Pulling all this together, Tolkien crafted a situation where Gollum promised by the ring to obey Frodo, and Frodo warned him that the ring would hold him to it. Then Faramir cursed Gollum to death if he ever served Frodo poorly. Then Frodo warned Gollum that if he tried to take back the ring, he would command him to leap from a precipice or cast himself into the fire, and Gollum would be bound to do it, given his subjugation to the ring's power. Then, when Gollum betrays Frodo and tries to take back the ring, Frodo, with all the ring's power and perhaps even coming from the ring itself, effectively places a word of command on him that if he touches him or it again, he shall be cast into the fire of doom. When Gollum takes the ring from Frodo by the cracks of doom, he effectively seals his own fate. Despite all the warnings he had received, when he falls moments later, he doesn't fall by accident. He falls because he was commanded to. At one stroke, this completely changes our understanding of not just technically what happened there at the end, but what themes and messages we can draw from the whole story. The traditional understanding is that Frodo failed because the power of the ring was ultimately too much for him, but the right result happened anyway because of Gollum being Gollum. This is actually a little disheartening when you think about it, that for all the mercy, pity, love, and self-sacrifice that preceded it, it wasn't any of that that made the ultimate difference. It was just that Gollum wasn't paying attention to where he put his feet. Now we have a new way of looking at it. It wasn't just Gollum being destroyed by his own weakness of character. This was the ring itself. We're told that Sauron poured all his cruelty, malice, and will to dominate all life into that ring, and that is what blazed forth in that command. cruelty, malice, and a desire for control over others. It's the ring's power that made Frodo lose his pity for Gollum. The One Ring ultimately caused its own downfall. It was destroyed by its own cruel commands to Gollum. Gollum wouldn't have been there but for Bilbo's pity, then Frodo's, and then Sam's, just minutes earlier when he could have killed him. That pity or mercy was not weakness but strength. It got the hobbits and the ring to where they needed to be. The One Ring's cruelty and power to control were ultimately not its strength but its greatest weakness. The destruction of the One Ring was not an accident. It was because the strength of evil in the world and the ring inevitably caused its own downfall, and good triumphed despite, or perhaps even because of, its weakness. That, I think, is much of what Tolkien wanted us to understand from the finale of his story.